Activity-based tests were designed for direct and individual assessment of children on one-to-one basis. The school readiness instrument, which was developed by the World Bank and standardized, was adapted for this study, which is testing children on cognitive and number concepts like pre-number competencies like spatial concept, pre-number, more or less concepts, sequential thinking, which includes abstract and experiential sequencing, classification, number concepts, which includes value and relative comparison. Language competencies like phonemic awareness, sentence formation, following instructions was also assessed under school readiness. Then we on the lines of the school readiness instrument, achievement test for 6 years, 7 years and 8-year-olds was designed. It continued to have some activities which are cognitive, you can call them readiness activities, like mathematic concepts like number conservation, seriations were included, sequential thinking, again abstract and experiential, classification, number concept, which included value and relative comparison, arithmetic operations. In language, we had phonemic awareness, picture description, book handling, reading sight words, listening and reading comprehension. So you'll see there's some bit of an overlap between the school readiness instrument and the achievement tests at 6, 7 and 8. So at times the difficulty level has been increased when the children, when these were designed. The school readiness, the findings of the study are the school readiness levels improve learning levels in elementary years. Children with higher school readiness levels do better in primary when they are 6 years, 7 years and 8 years. So the graph on the right is actually explaining if the child, this is plotted against the different quartiles the child had when it comes to the school readiness levels at age 5, and then their average scores on assessment tests. So one can see a very linear relationship between school readiness levels with the achievement tests at age 6, 7 and 8. And the table also describes the correlation values. One can see that the school readiness levels at age 5 are significantly correlated with learning levels at 8 as well. Yes, school readiness has an impact, and children who do well on school readiness do well at later ages as well. But what we find in the study is that children are not doing too well on school readiness itself. So the school readiness levels are quite low at age 5, specifically on cognitive and language competencies. We also assess children on psychosocial aspect of school readiness, where the primary caregivers were asked specific questions about the child on how the child would respond to certain psychosocial aspects or behavioral things like sharing or being comfortable around more children, or task perseverance, or communication skills or self-help skills which are required to be ready for school. So these skills were at the expected acceptable levels, but when it came to the cognitive and the language competencies, they were deficient. And these competencies, if you look at them, I'm going to explain them a little later, but they are very much linked to the experiences and the curriculum that the child is exposed to. So this indicates that there's a need for age and developmentally appropriate preschool as well as early primary curriculum. The bar graph illustrates the different scores, the mean score that children got on all of these different competencies. So the difficult competencies in the school readiness were sequential thinking. So here, when we are looking at the at the hand pump and the bucket. So the children were given placards and explained how a bucket is filled with water, and then they were asked to place these cards in sequence. The children were given asked question on classification of birds and animals and phonemic awareness. They were asked to identify the starting sounds and also identify which two pictures had the same starting sounds. And there was a pattern which was given to the child to complete. So these were some the four main activities which the children were not able, not very high percentage of children could do it at age 5. So these were some difficult competencies. So if we see, if school readiness, which school readiness activities are making the difference in early years, we have done an analysis on the larger data set, which is Strand A's data set of almost 11,000 children. It says that children who could do all these 10, we have 10 activities in the school readiness instrument which the child was administered to. All these 10 activities, if the child was children who could do it and children who could not do those activities, and their learning levels were tracked over time on language and maths competencies. So at age 6, 7 and 8, the difference that is there is significant. So all of these activities, all these competencies are making a difference. Here I've only looked at the 4 competencies which emerged at very, very difficult for children. So children who could do classification scored much higher on mathematics as well as language, and in comparison to children who could not do it. And same with the other competencies as well. So how are children learning? So because like I mentioned that there were many of the competencies so children were not able to achieve at age 5, we continue to have those in the test, because to see how the children are going to learn and what is the time when the children are getting those competencies. So in our tools we continue to have some of these items. These items are like 4 questions which we continue to have, that the sequential thinking, which is talking about the bucket and the water filling of the bucket, pattern completion, phoneme awareness, and relative comparison, where we are asking the child about what is more and less, which number is greater than the others. So what we find is that children over time children do better on these activities, but what is coming out is that children are getting are able to, more and more children are able to do these activities only at age 7 and 8, whereas we expect children, these are precursors, prerequisites for grade 1, so children are expected to have these competencies at age 5, but they're getting those competencies only at age 7 and 8. The factors contributing to these learning levels, the regression analysis done on the learning levels among 8-year-olds show that there are multiple factors which are contributing to learning levels of children, which include factors like age of the child, household characteristics like mother's educational status, socioeconomic status, participation in EC program at age 4, and the quality of the EC preschool program that the child is exposed to. School readiness levels at age 5. This is the most significant contributor to the learning levels at age 8, and quality of the current program. So it's not just the quality of the preschool program which has a significant impact, it's also the quality of the current program. Household factors like mother's education and print-rich environment have a significant relationship. So children coming from a household which has more print material around, children tend to do better on learning levels as well as school readiness. So children coming from a disadvantaged family therefore needs much more support to narrow the gap between in the preschool itself. So the implications are that even 1 year of preschool at age 4 to 5 makes a significant difference in terms of school readiness levels. School readiness levels make a significant difference to the learning levels of children up to 8 years. It might be that they make a difference later on also, but the data that we have is still 8 years. But school readiness levels are low across the different types of programs and across different states. Despite, but the participation trends, like Rukmini ma'am was also talking about, that the children are in schools, whether it's an Anganwadi, whether it's a private school, whether it's a government school. Underage participation is also seen in the study that we are doing. Children are in schools at age 3, 8, 4, but they're not getting the appropriate curriculum or the experience that they're supposed to get to get the foundational competencies in cognition and language, which are essential for doing better for later learning. The recommendations are that a role of school readiness should be recognized and acknowledged when it comes to learning levels. The preschool curriculum must include cognitive and language competencies in a child-friendly pedagogy to ensure school readiness levels among children. And for sustained significant impact on learning levels in elementary, upward continuity of curriculum is required and not downward extension of the primary curriculum to pre-primary. Thank you.
One of the slides showed that at age 5, I think, the children performed best at following instructions. My panelists are also doing very well on that. Everybody has been well within the time limit. So I would request Professor Mohanty to